Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of College Football Under Review, a show made by a football fan for football fans everywhere. So today we have a very, very special episode as we have a very, 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 very special guest with us today. He has been coaching for 27 years, 4 in Georgia, the rest in the beautiful state of Alabama. He has won a state title in 4 different sports as a coach, that being football, wrestling, golf, and bowling. He has currently the title of head coach for the men's bowling and golf team at the Vestavia Hills High School. We want to welcome Coach Todd Evans. How are you doing today, Todd?
Doing great.
Oh, that's great to hear. So I want to first say congratulations on your 2 state titles this year in 2025. You are the first head coach in Vestavia Hills High School history, I believe, to win 2 state championships in the same year, and that being golf and bowling. So how did you kind of feel going into the state championship with both of these different teams? One was very close, obviously, with bowling against Thompson, I believe,
yeah.
And the other one, golf, where they kind of ran away with it and left everyone else in the dust.
Well, I felt like with both teams going in, we would be in the discussion for a championship. But then once I started seeing the teams build and the chemistry that they had, and a lot of that came down to the things we were doing off the field. Both bowling and golf did a lot of stuff in the community. Bowling did a lot of stuff with Special Olympics. Golf did a lot of stuff with assisted living facility in Vestavia called Morningside. And then they both got together and raked senior citizens' yards at Christmas. So I felt like with all of that, the chemistry and the talent we had in the rooms, we had a chance. But, you played for me. Just because you have talent doesn't mean you're going to win. You have to be a little bit lucky, but you also have to show up when it counts, and both teams did that.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like both teams peaked at the right time of the season. I know that's now more of a problem in college football with how long the playoffs now go. So congratulations again on both those state titles, and congratulations to all the players that won that. So we're going to transition into our football talk as we are a football show. And the first thing we are going to discuss is Dabo Swinney's approach to the now new and evolved transfer portal combined with NIL. So he really has kind of set himself apart ever since the transfer portal began, said, I'm going to continue getting high school guys. I'm not going to utilize the transfer portal. I'm going to focus on keeping and developing players while also developing their coach-to-player relationship. How important do you think this is with this modern era of college football? And if he doesn't have success this season, as it definitely seems like this is the culmination of his work the last couple of years with this, what does it prove about the recruiting and transfer portal nowadays and what it takes to succeed in college football?
Well, first off, I hope he does have success because I like what they do. I've had a player come through that program, and Dabo does a great job with the culture, creating good people, those types of things. I feel like if he doesn't have success, it's a slippery slope that we could go down to this where guys are in and out. They're already in and out of some programs. But if Clemson doesn't have success, I do think Coach Swinney will adapt because at the end of the day, that's your job, is to win games. I like the way he's trying to do it. I just don't know how realistic it is. But, I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, and I believe I think he's one of the top favorites, at least in Vegas, to win the ACC title. The only reason I think is because he's had continued success in the ACC. They haven't been as strong. When we're kind of comparing it to Ohio State of last year, when they had so many returners join because they had that culture of, oh, we want to win a national championship before we go off to the professional football league. Do you believe that he does have a chance to make a serious title run this year?
I think he does. Some of that you alluded to with the league not being as strong as some of the other leagues. But one thing Ohio State did is they went out and they were weak at the safety position. They went out and got some NIL guys at the safety position, one of those being Caleb Downs from Alabama. I think Coach Swinney will be okay in the league. It's going to come down to the playoffs. What's your draw? Who do you have to go against? There's a little bit of luck in that. We just talked about that. And winning a championship, you need a little bit of luck. And I think if he makes a long run, then everything's fine. If you don't, well, you know how it is. People start chirping, and then it becomes a snowball effect, and then you either have to adapt or you become like the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Definitely true. So when you were talking about how your draw within the national championship playoffs, Steve Sarkisian in the SEC meetings back in May said that we may never see another undefeated true national championship team. Do you think that this is kind of due to the NIL structure and transfer, or how long the season has become? And in our opinion for the show, it's because he's trying to save his own butt.
It could be a little bit of that. It's always good to say that, knowing you might drop one. But I think it has to do with the league he plays in. I mean, the SEC week in, week out, based on the venues you go to, the talent you're going to see, it becomes too hard. And then you got to think about this. Even if you come from a hard league, you're probably not going to go. You're not going to go undefeated coming out of the SEC, or probably even some of the other hard leagues. But let's say you go undefeated in the ACC. Well, now you draw an SEC team in the playoffs. Now you're not going to win that game because so it's a balancing act between strength of schedule and your draw and your success in the playoffs. And I think Sarkisian is setting himself up for maybe having a little more of a leash, But I do think there's some validity to what he said.
Okay. Kind of getting back to Dabo Swinney and what he's been doing. If he doesn't have the success in the playoffs, do you think that this is really going to hinder Group of 5 teams and their conference's strategy of developing players? Because what's the point of developing if they're just going to go to the Power 4?
Yeah, I think the system's kind of messed up and broken. And I don't know why college football has this, we can't follow the NFL. I mean, it took forever to get a playoff model in college football. The NFL has a system with contracts, collective bargaining, all of that would be built perfect for the NIL situation. But if, let's say I'm playing at Troy, or let's say I'm coaching at Troy, and I develop Nick Watts, who comes out as a 2 or a 3-star, but he has a great year and he develops into a great player. I've put a lot of financial resources into recruiting you and developing you. And now let's say Tennessee comes in and wants you and you bolt. I get nothing in return. Whereas if I was a coach coaching at Troy and I had a contract, Tennessee wants to come get me, they've got to pay Troy compensation for me to leave. So I think if they did something like that for the lower tier schools, it might offset the expense of building a player and losing them, and then it makes it to where they can survive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. The way I believe that the Group of 5 may shake out is dependent upon where some of these schools are located geographically, depending on how many Fortune 500s could potentially be in the state.
Right.
Even in Power 4, Mississippi, I believe, does not have a single Fortune 500 company within the state, so they have to rely strictly on the alumni, not regionality. I think someone like Tulane in the city of New Orleans has such an appeal to players and could probably draw in enough NIL business, even though we have this new revenue sharing with the House versus NCAA settlement. I still think that there could be a lot of third-party NIL bargains that could go with that. Do you think some of this regionality with where certain campuses can be will determine their success within the Group of 5 structure?
I do. I think Mississippi's unique because even though they don't have the financial backing, one thing they have is they have that immense junior college football system. And with the Diego Pavia ruling, those guys are now penalty-free and right there in Ole Miss and Mississippi State's back door to recruit. So there's that. So they have that advantage. I think the bigger ones that you got to think about is like you mentioned a Tulane. Tulane's right there in New Orleans, which is a hotbed for players. I mean, when I was playing, I played high school ball right outside of New Orleans. The talent coming out of there, and we saw what happened when Coach Saban went to LSU and put a fence around the state. It flipped LSU. And so I feel like Tulane's one that could be sitting there. I think any of the Texas schools, because of the money that Texas has, but also because of the volume of players there. And then I think some of the Florida schools. So your larger population bases. But the other thing that we need to think about too, and I know this is crazy, I'm an econ guy, is NIL money relative to your tax rate in California relative to NIL money in your tax rate in Texas. Players could actually make less money in Texas and take home more because of the tax rate than they could in California.
Now, that's something I didn't think about, and that's an argument right now in the NHL with the Florida Panthers now winning back-to-back Stanley Cup titles. Is it because that they're able to get more bang for their buck because they have no state income tax? It's a great thought. And so kind of dealing with that and with all these NIL structures and dealings, as a high school recruit, and the recruiting process is continuous year-round, how have you seen the NIL culture change through high school recruiting strategies?
Well, I think now there's it used to be, well, first off, here's what recruiting always will be. You find out what type of person you're dealing with, what they value the most, and then you try to sell that part of your program to get them there. So if like Nick Watts, if I'm recruiting you and I know you're a huge culture guy, I'm going to sell our culture. Well, a lot of guys, and let's just be honest, we're talking about, if we talk about great players that are coming from a low income family you can't blame the players for chasing the money. They have a lot of these kids, if they come from generational poverty, they have the chance to change the scope for people for years to come based on their decision on a financial basis. The problem is they don't have the training, financial literacy to really manage that money the right way. So really, what are we teaching kids by just writing a blank check for signing your name? And then the commitment, if somebody gives you this much money to come to your university and then you're going a year later, what are we teaching people about commitment? And then if I go to a campus and things don't go great, I can just transfer to another school. How's that teaching that kid to have resilience and perseverance and all those things that you need when you get in the real world? Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm kind of worried. But in recruiting, I think it's hurt walk-ons more than anything, because now you've got basically, you used to have an 85 scholarship limit. Well, if you can sign 100 guys, the NIL could offset the scholarship. So I think it's hurt the walk-ons more than anything.
I definitely agree with that. And they have limited the roster amount as well by 20 spots, I believe.
Yep.
So that has definitely hurt the walk-ons. And even some of these schools are still kind of like, no, we're okay with the 85 roster scholarship limit. While some schools are like, we're going to, use it as much as we like. So, I mean, at the end of the day, people aren't really caring about the walk-ons because some people are just saying, yeah, we're good with the 85 and we're just going to let them deal with it.
That's right. And, there's a lot of guys that still see the value in walk-ons. I was listening to A.J. McCarron talking about walk-ons being glue people for your program because they really set the tone and there's a lot of work ethic there. And I know Coach Smart at Georgia is big into that because, he always has felt like those kids have a special place on the team. So there are a few coaches hanging on to that, but I think it's slowly dying. And at the end of the day, if you can do it and have success, you'll be okay. If you don't have success, you better figure out a way to have success or you won't be there long.
Mm-hmm. And so how you kind of talked about the contract versus culture and where you kind of choose which institution you would like to play for, these players are not only facing an education and development of their talent with a program, they're also choosing a contract. And how does that affect a football program's culture? Is it this fine line where they need to only grab culture guys or only grab specific contract players or kind of mix both or kind of put a more of a price tag on the premier players while keeping the general foundation of the team culture?
Well, I still believe that the best teams are the ones that their best players work the hardest. And so I think you've got to be really careful when you're recruiting. If you're a senior quarterback for me and you're making $400,000 NIL and I'm going out and signing a freshman who's going to be your backup for $1.1 million, then what does that say to you? So I think it's a mixture, like you said. I think you need to have a balance of culture guys, but you also got to have some guys that can change the game because as good as me, you can have the best roster. If you don't have the trigger man at quarterback, you're probably not going to go real far. Now, I say that, and Ohio State just won a national championship with a guy that's probably just an average quarterback. But I think being elite at that position helps you have success. There is no cap. That's the other thing. And you alluded to Fortune 500 companies, and when you don't have a salary cap, what's too much? You know, like what's the price? Well, how much are we willing to spend? People talk about rosters being $30 million rosters. I mean, there's got to be some way to reel it in to where we can still have because ultimately what's going to happen is if college football doesn't keep what made it great, it'll lose fans, because what's going to separate it from the NFL? You'll know more about who's playing year to year in the NFL than you will who's going to be there year to year in college because of contracts.
I definitely agree. I think the evolution of the sport in college football has separated itself from all the other programs in any institution, that they have gotten to a state where they are more fearful of evolution and evolving with the times than keeping the foundation that has kept college football so completely different from everything else. I mean, the only other sport that comes close to touching it is college basketball, and it seemingly only captures the casual fan for 1 month out of the year, during March Madness.
Yeah, exactly.
When college football captures the people for 4 or 5 months.
Well, we're talking about it now, and we're sitting here in late June, almost early July.
Oh, I talk about it almost every day when I have a chance. I mean, it's our world. That's why we got the show here.
Yep.
And I've got to ask this. I'm curious about the state of Alabama, as being from here and love Nick Saban. We are Alabama fans. We are Bama sexual, as we have put out there. How has the Alabama high school recruitment been in the state of Alabama since Nick Saban has departed? Is it kind of more open to other, programs that are kind of sneaking their way in?
Well, I don't know if it's as much with his retirement as much as it is his retirement added to the NIL era. I feel like other people have started coming in, other schools have started coming in here and kind of poaching players from the state of Alabama, especially when you talk about geographically. A kid that lives in Mobile is closer to Baton Rouge than he is to Tuscaloosa. So you've got to remember that too. And then, but I do think that the thing Coach Saban had was he had instant credibility. He could walk into any school in this state and the school shut down, Yeah. So I think there's that mystique. I mean, there's only one Nick Saban, and being an Alabama fan myself, we've been fortunate to have two of the greatest coaches ever. And I think that credibility is definitely lost right now. And that credibility can only be built over time. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a while, before anybody can get close to that. But there's definitely a difference. He was so good. I don't know if I say him, but he made it a mission of his staff to be so good to high school coaches in the state, myself included, that it really was different,
And I think with the departure of sort of this old guard with coaches, and we're seeing younger and younger coaches come in, we have discussed on this show, interestingly enough, that we think that the NIL giving people an equal opportunity throughout the board is already skewed, because in a world of social media and how we're perceived every day, it almost seems that these schools like Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State are going to recruit so much easier with NIL because they already have the prestige and history over a lot of these group of 5 schools, and they already have that name, image, and likeness that everyone wants to go after and profit from.
Well, I think so. I had the ability. I went over to Ole Miss in the spring, and this is a 100% compliment. Lane Kiffin has the old schoolness of Nick Saban with the new schoolness, social media, understanding NIL, understanding the transfer portal. So I think he's probably, look what he's doing at Ole Miss. When's the last time Ole Miss has had this much success consistently in a 4 to 5 year window? And being over there, there's a lot of Saban influence there. Pete Golding's there. One of my former players is an analyst there. And so you can definitely see the footprint. That's what people understand. Yeah, Coach Saban retired, but his footprint's still out there. And Coach Kiffin runs a program that's modern, and he's put his own system. He's put his own spin on it. He's really good at social media, as we all know. He's really good at the NIL. but he also has those core values that can't be compromised if you're going to have success. So I feel like I'm coming out of their spring practice. I feel like they could be a surprise team this year that really jumps up and beats some people.
Yeah, I definitely think that they are a dark horse within
Quarterback's
the
really
SEC.
good. Really good.
Yes. Didn't he already graduate undergrad, I believe?
I don't know about that, but I watched him come in and play against, I think it was Georgia. And then from what I saw at the spring practice I was at, he's different. You know, his arm talent, athleticism, all of that. Of course, we talk about luck and all that, but I was just really impressed coming out of there with their new facilities. And for whatever reason, Lane Kiffin's kept the culture even with having all these new faces. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because he's such a strong presence and he's got guys under him that believe in what he's doing and they're helping him drive that culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely think that every coach that has gone through the Saban Rehab Center is definitely going to be a premium going forward, as they're going to be really the last remnants of what Coach Saban instilled. And Lane Kiffin is obviously known for his offense and how even when he was coaching at Alabama as offensive coordinator, he really revolutionized how Alabama played the offensive side of the ball. And with how offenses have continuously become more explosive and intricate, how has the defensive side of the ball evolved throughout those years? Because as fans, we all see more touchdowns, more, trick plays, all this, but how has the defense really evolved?
Well, how much time do we have? But, I mean, here's the biggest way I can tell you. So in the old school days, the way that everybody called defense was they would call like front stunt coverage or front blitz coverage, like, under magic 66, whatever it was. Now what guys have done to fit that tempo, the fast tempo they play with, is guys have trimmed it down to where, like if we were going to do like base or flex, buzz, 6 tango, you might call that bingo. So you trim it down to one call so that you can streamline your call structure. And we started doing some of this when I was at Vestavia because we were having to play like the Hewitt Trustfuls of the world and things like that. And so we had really smart kids. I had a safety named Will Brooks that played for Tennessee this last year. And so we had built a system that was built to stop tempo because, let's face it, at Vestavia, we were going to see the I formation with Coach Anderson. Mm-hmm. So we had to really adapt to the times. I think that's where you'll see. I think Ole Miss does a good job of it, spending 2 days with Coach Golding and listening to how they do things. Obviously, he's got a lot of influence on him from Coach Saban, being with him for a while. But Coach Golding does a good job. Coach Golding's actually from the same neck of the woods I'm from. His dad was a high school coach down where I played. So he's done a really good job of streamlining it. And it's coming down to turnover margin. If you can steal a possession once or twice in a half, you cut teams down by a lot. So there's 3 goals that we always focused on when we were playing tempo teams. The first one you're going to find, this is all the technical football jargon.
Oh, we're here for it.
On first down, we would try to hold opponents to 2 yards or less 67% of the time, which sets them up obviously in the second long situations. On third down, we wanted to get a stop rate of 67% of the time. That puts you 2/3 of the time you're getting off the field on third down. And then we want to create 3 turnovers, 1 on their end of the field. And every time, this is going back to when I was a graduate assistant at UAB in the late 90s, every time we hit all 3 of those goals, it didn't matter what the offense did, we won the game. I've never hit all 3 goals and lost a game. So you have these guys that have these intricate goal boards with like 50 things. It always comes back to those 3. It always comes back to those. And they do a really good job at Ole Miss of kind of simplifying things and making it likable and learnable. And I sat through a linebacker meeting, and just the way that Golding teaches, you can see the players are really engaged. And I feel like they have a chance to be special. I feel like South Carolina, even though they lost a lot of players, Shane Beamer's obviously changed that culture up there.
Definitely.
I feel like they could be real good, and they do a good job versus tempo teams. And then there's always Georgia, because we talk about the Saban footprint. Well, that's not a Saban footprint. That's like he walked over the – Coach Smart is a direct disciple of his, and they do a really good job with what they play or who they play. And so I feel like defenses have evolved, but they haven't gone really crazy. And I think what helps college is the substitution rule. And so one thing I've seen people do is if you go out of bounds on your sideline, I don't know if you know this in college, they count that as a substitution, because if like you're carrying the ball and you run out of bounds on your sideline. So a lot of people are teaching their kids to stay in bounds so that they can play up tempo, because then they have a free sub. And you've seen the pace those linemen run on the field at.
Yeah.
I mean, baseball, it's a baseball coach walking to the pitcher's mound to pull a pitcher. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So we don't have that in high school. And the hashes are wider. So think about this. We're playing Hewitt Trussville. They get the ball in their hash. They can sub whoever they want to, and I can't sub because they don't hold the clock. So I think there's a lot of bleed over, like guys looking into the high school ranks to get ideas of how to deal with that stuff. And it's going to come back to negative plays. Can you on defense create enough negative plays to get them behind the chain so that the third down rate I talked about, that turnover rate I talked about, those kind of, and they're only, if you watch any game, they're only really fast on first and second down. If it's 3rd and 6 plus, watch the difference in the tempo they play with.
Yeah, and I really like how I think that since I would say we've gone away from the 3 yards in a cloud of dust, the defenses, especially during Saban, they were a lot slower, bigger guys up front, kind of only having the safeties be small. But ever since Clemson kind of took down Saban, he has had to evolve. And now we see smaller defensive players kind of in the linebacker position, I feel like, and playing multi-roles. Do you think someone like Travis Hunter 10 years ago would have been as successful as he was with how the offensive side of the ball has evolved with the defense?
Probably, I think so. And I'll tell you why, because I look at guys like Charles Woodson, same type player. I just think that good players find a way, But there's something you brought up that's really funny. So here's my question to you, and this is what I think is, can you be the fly in the ointment per se? So if you know that every defense is becoming smaller and more athletic to combat the spread, then who's going to be the guy that steps out and signs the big power backs, the Derrick Henrys, and says, I'm going to mash these little guys because they're built to stop all these spread teams, and we're going to line up in 3 tight ends, 2 tight ends, extra O linemen, which we're starting to see it come back around. There's some teams doing that now. And that's giving people fits, because for all week and, 51 weeks out of the year, you're sitting there worried about the spread, and now somebody's going to line up and pound you. And if you're an up-tempo offense, how frustrating is it for you if you know you're going to take the service academies, for instance? They're out recruited. Everybody's, but they'll go in and they'll play somebody you've never heard that they shouldn't play tough, really tough, because they can shorten the game. And so I feel like the teams that are talent detrimented, it benefits them to be able to go and do that old school. I mean, Coach Anderson, people used to get frustrated with him, but the thing is, I mean, we weren't getting blown out. No. We would always have a chance to win it late because he was just going to stay committed to a run game. He knew in high school he couldn't go out and recruit guys. He knew what he had on the sideline. He let us have some good players on defense. He let us be built to stop the spread. And then he just lined up and pounded people. And I mean, one of my good friends is Mark Freeman at Thompson. He said, the problem with y'all's offense is you blink your eyes and it's the second quarter.
Yeah, I think the college team that you can associate that most with is Brent Key and Georgia Tech.
Yes.
The way that their clock management is, in my opinion, the sole reason they were able to beat Miami, also with their turnover margin that they had against them. Cam Ward's probably worst game of the year. You just caught lightning in a bottle. And their clock management and way to attack the defense.
And they pound the ball.
Yeah. Now, we'll see if Miami is able to get a better defense this season. But on this show, we like to call their head coach Mario Crystal dropped the ball, as he has come up short so many times. But if there are any defenses that you have seen this year, what are kind of some that you like, or some that fans may be shocked that will be good this season?
I brought up Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Because I've seen them in person and I'm so impressed with how they teach and how they coach, the energy they practice with, and the players they have. They have really good players. They got a couple corners. One of their corners is a long kid from, I think he played at high school at Tuscaloosa County. I don't know his name offhand, but he's got a pretty bright future. I feel like Texas A&M Mike Elko, wherever he goes, has a way of having good defenses, and I feel like he could be real. They could be special. Georgia is going to be loaded. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how many players they've lost. When's the last time Georgia was bad on defense? When's the last time Kirby Smart was bad on defense? They're going to be good. And then I think the dark horse in the SEC is South Carolina. And then you brought up Clemson earlier with Peter Woods, who's probably a first-round draft pick that you saw play a little bit in high school.
Yeah.
I think because a guy like that can change a game. So I think there's a lot of those type teams, but I would still say, for me, just the personal connections I have, I'm really excited to watch what Ole Miss can do on defense.
Love to hear it. And kind of bringing it back to high school students, I know with you as a head coach, when I was under you, you really promoted being a dual athlete or playing other sports outside of the one that you coached. And it seems today in the high school culture that high school students, now whether that's parent pressure or coach pressure or anything, there's always going to be outside factors. It seems that they have sort of started to become hyper fixated on one sport. Like you're 8. Oh, wow, you're doing better in your basketball. Well, we're only going to focus on that and build you up. What opportunities and experience are these players missing out on if they don't play more than one sport?
Well, I can only go on the guys that I've had personal relationships with that have done this. And I feel like as coaches, you have to control what you can control. And one thing that I always wanted to do was I felt like as a coach, it was my job to open as many doors for my players as possible and let them decide which one to go through. And I think you've probably heard me say that before. And so I feel like as coaches, a lot of coaches say, I want multi-sport guys, but then they fill up the off season when they're in another sport with all these activities. So the kid feels like he's falling behind. So in a way, you may be saying that you want multi-sport guys, but are your actions really showing that? So like I had Will Brooks, who was a great lacrosse player. I worked with him every way possible. He would tell you that if he was here, that I worked with him every way possible so that he could play lacrosse, because he could have gone to college to play lacrosse. People may not know that. And then Joe Sullivan, who's now, I think, in the Astros organization, played baseball at South Alabama. He was going to showcases in the month of June and July. And I told him, you go do that. We'll catch up with a Zoom meeting. I can tell you what coverages we're putting in, because I knew I wanted to help Joe achieve his dreams. His dream was to play college baseball. But I also knew what Friday night would look like without Joe. And it wouldn't have been good. And then with the team that you were on, having a guy that was a baseball guy and Mason Manners that went on and played left field for Auburn, I never wanted to be the guy that made them choose. I wanted to open as many doors. It helped a culture of our team to have those guys around. And honestly, I was a multi-sport guy, and I felt like my coaches did a great job with that. And I just think we're losing that a little bit. It could be parent expectations, but I feel like I've never had that problem with guys choosing another sport. I mean, bowling's not a sport you're going to choose if you're a good baseball player. But I keep them around. And then 2 years ago, I have Michael Brewer, who's a college golfer now, that bowled for me. And this year I've got a kid named Reed Lazenby on my state championship team who's playing for Vestavia in baseball. So it's our job as coaches to make concessions to keep the kids out. And I feel like if we're not doing everything in our power, and if we need to look at our actions, then we need to really analyze what we're doing.
I like all of that. Yeah, great take on that. Now, going back to the state of Alabama, we've got 2 coaches that are seemingly could be on the chopping block, and it's surprising to think about that. In both being Alabama and Auburn, UAB Trent Dilfer, I think, is already on a very hot seat. But in the state of Alabama, you got no pro teams. The only rivalry that we care about when it comes to Thanksgiving, which I always love, Thursday, you're thankful for your Auburn fans, but not that Saturday. No, you're not thankful for your Auburn fans. So who, in your opinion, is more on the hot seat? DeBoer, the head coach of Alabama, who's on his second year after completely just choking the 10-win season streak that Saban had given him, losing to Michigan in that bowl game, or Hugh Freeze, who is coming into his 3rd season as the Auburn football head coach, and the preseason rank has them at 14, which is pretty lofty.
Well, I think I can answer that with 2 words, Saban and Harsin. Sometimes it's more about who you follow than what you're doing, because if Kalen DeBoer follows Mike Shula and wins 9 games, but there's an expectation at Alabama that I think sometimes can be unrealistic, but I also think that he's on a hotter seat because of who he followed, not because of anything other than just that. Hugh Freeze probably is on a hot seat, but I don't know if it's that hot, because when your expectation is 14, like Alabama fans, if they're not in the top 5, you know how it is. You've been around this place.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
the world's falling apart.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on anywhere else in the world. If Alabama's not ranked in the top 5, they're not going to be happy. And I'm an Alabama fan. But I do think Kalen DeBoer is on a much hotter seat just because of who he followed.
I definitely agree with that. There is this sentiment, it seems like, around the state where if he has another 3-loss season and we do not make the playoffs, someone might be looking for his head.
Well, it depends on who those 3 are. I don't think it can be Oklahoma and Vanderbilt.
No.
You don't make the playoffs for those, as we've seen. But I think if those were 3 teams, like if it was like a Georgia and 2 like an LSU that's having a really good year, and then 1 other, like maybe a Tennessee, then maybe. But as good as me, even if it's those 3, Bama fans are not going to be happy.
So I've got a chaos scenario for this topic. Let's say DeBoer, he has 2 losses, good SEC teams that are vying for the playoffs, and Hugh Freeze is in the same spot. He's got 2 losses. It seems like Auburn is back on the rise, and they go to Tuscaloosa, and Hugh Freeze does the impossible and beats Kalen DeBoer in the Iron Bowl to finish out the season. They make the playoffs. DeBoer, what happens to him?
Do they make the playoffs or not?
If they do not make the playoffs due to the Iron Bowl loss. And it's an interesting thought, because have been so many times where Auburn will play Alabama in the Iron Bowl. They'll have a mediocre coach, and as soon as that coach beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl, they say, oh my gosh, we found our guy, have a 7-year contract
and then he's fired
extension.
2 years later.
Yes, and it's crazy because during Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama and all the coaches at Auburn, Alabama paid less for Nick Saban than Auburn did for all their
100%.
coaches. So in that chaos scenario, do you think DeBoer is gone?
No, I think what happens is, and we've seen this movie before, there's a lot of changes that happen on the coaching staff, coordinators, those types of things. And that gets him 1 more year, but that's also always say when that happens, that's the beginning of the end. And so for Auburn to be a 10-win team, you've got to think about, then it becomes, who are those other 2? Does that make sense? So
yes.
If Alabama's 10-2 going to that game, if those 2 are LSU and Georgia, and those 2 teams are really good, and you lose your 3rd game to an Auburn team that's also lost to an undefeated Georgia and maybe 1 other that's good, then he might still make the playoffs, especially now with the top 4 seeds not being decided on conference championships and all that anymore. So there's a little bit of that, but that would be, first off, I don't want to see the police reports the next day if that scenario happens.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen what happens in this state when Alabama loses to Auburn. I mean,
some private property will be damaged.
Well, people and trees, as we know. So, I mean, who knows what will happen.
So dealing with the SEC, it kind of seems like it is a down tick for the SEC. It's turning into a down year. Do you kind of sense that? And if so, what other factors outside being another conference could kind of rise up and challenge the SEC this season if the SEC does have a down year?
Well, I think if SEC, I don't think once we start playing, it'll be down because I just think there's so many good football coaches and good athletes in this conference that the cream always rises to the top. I mean, and it's going to be the usual. There might be a surprise team. A South Carolina can make a run, but I think it's going to be the Georgias, the Texas A&M, Bama, maybe a dark horse like Auburn could sneak in there. But I really see Ohio State, Michigan. Michigan's got a good quarterback coming in Bryce Underwood, and their offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey, who I worked for at Spain Park, does a good job. So I really feel like that conference is probably the biggest competition. I mean, heck, Ohio State just won the national championship. So, I mean, there's your quality right there. I don't really worry about the Pac-12. Is it Pac-12 now?
Well, it's still the Pac-12. And in our last show, we talked about how, did you know that Oregon State and Washington State are still this is the last year under the Rose Bowl contract, that they are still receiving money. And that is why they stuck together. So last year, they each received $50 million.
Oh, wow.
And they're receiving another $50 million.
Wow, that's a lot of money in Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah, and so I think
Corvallis. That's Corvallis.
I think that's why they stuck together. But yes, they need one more team to officially be the Pac-12 come the next season, and they're looking for that last team right now.
Yeah, and I saw where Texas State might be that team.
Possibly. But right now, they still have all the kind of mountain and
which
West
goes back
Coast
to what
teams.
we were talking about with those big states that have the Fortune 5 companies. Texas State's another team that could sneak into that group too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting to see. I think it'll still be we'll see it go from the group of 5 to group of 6. I don't think we'll ever really be back to the Power 5 unless Boise State can somehow keep making a run. Yeah. But we'll see if that's possible. So do you have a national championship favorite?
I mean, obviously I'm crimson and white, so I'm going to pull for Alabama. I've got a son that's in school there, and so I go to a lot of the games. And, I tell you what, I'd like to see LSU make a run at it if Alabama can't be there. Mm-hmm. Because growing up in Louisiana, the thing we fight against in Alabama is we're a split state. I'd say half the state. I'd say 30% of the state's blue and orange, and the other 70% is crimson and white. It's not that way in Louisiana. I mean, it's purple and gold, and everybody knows it. Even Tulane knows that. They know not the Tigers, as they say it down there, Tigers. The Tigers take precedence. So I would really like to see that happen, because that place, I mean, coming off a baseball national championship, going into a football national championship, they just do it. They do it right down there.
Yes, they
and
do.
That whole state is built for that. And they love a good party. So, I mean, why not LSU, right?
Okay. If you got LSU, do they lose or win week 1?
Against who they play?
Clemson. At Clemson. We're calling it the battle for Death Valley. As both of them claim their stadium name is Death Valley, but we'll see who really can hold that title.
Because of the both have returning quarterbacks.
Yes.
Talk about hot seat. Let Brian Kelly go up there and lose that game. Mm-hmm. And then you need to tune into WWL Sports Radio Monday morning.
He has not won a week 1 game in the program.
Because he lost that Florida State game a couple years ago.
Since he has gotten in LSU, he has yet to win a week 1 game.
I'm saying this. If LSU wins that game, look out.
Okay.
If they don't, I think they might fall apart. But if they win that game, look out. Now, they do have to come to Tuscaloosa.
Yes, they do.
So they've got to go to Clemson and go to Tuscaloosa all in the same year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank God they have a playoff, because if they don't have a playoff, they don't make it even in the picture.
I definitely understand that. And so at the end of every episode, we have a segment we call Off Our Chest. And so we've got a question for you for our Off Our Chest.
All right.
And I'm a film guy, love movies. Do you have a favorite football movie? Because for me personally, I'm a any given Sunday type of guy. Love Oliver Stone, love all of his work. And I think that's a fun movie with Jamie Foxx and Al Pacino, and it does something great. What's a football movie you have to get off your chest?
Can I have 2?
Yeah.
Okay. First one's the original, The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds. When I saw that, I saw that movie. What's better than a bunch of guys that are in prison playing football against the guards, right? And it was so just, how the old school movies are. Mm-hmm. It was just such the comedy back then was unfiltered, and they didn't worry about offending people and all that. So the original Longest Yard. And the second one, because I'm from Louisiana, is The Waterboy.
Of course.
Because there's so many stereotypes that are true. I mean, Bobby Boucher, I think I've played, I know for a fact, I played with some guys to where their mom was a lot like Bobby's mom. Mm-hmm. And I never dated a Vicky Valancourt, but I will say that the Louisiana stereotypes in that movie are hilarious to me. And I grew up there, but everything about that movie is hilarious. I love it.
Sounds great. If anyone in our audience hasn't seen those two movies, sounds like you need to check them out. Well, that is all for our very, very special interview and our very special guest, Todd Evans. So you can expect next week we'll go back to our normal show format, and we will be talking about any news that is relevant to college football and the world of college football. But I want to say thank you again, Coach Todd Evans.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
First, it's always great to see my old players, you being one, doing things like this. And that's the best part of this job, is seeing my guys grow up and going to do better things. And I just want to say thank you for having me on, and how much I've enjoyed being your friend and coach. And it's been great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, that's all for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and stay tuned for next week when we take more college football under review.